The first step in making the traveling merchant is to get something that is a similar size to what I want to make, and then make an armature with approximately the same proportions. This armature is made out of some paper clips, and it is connected together with some aluminum foil. Usually I have an armature for the arms, but I messed up and broke off that part, so this time I don't have any armature for the arms. Right now I'm connecting both of the pieces of the chest together with some aluminum foil so that it is one larger piece. I then start to make all of the colors that I'm going to need throughout the project, but mostly just the main three ones, which is the blue, the maroonish, and, of course, the tan. Once I have all of the major colors for this, I get a base layer of the blue around the base of the body in order to make the armature more rigid and structured. Then I cover the legs in the maroon color, and I make it so that the legs are the proper leg shape. Once both of the legs are covered in the maroon, I then add a piece of clay in between the legs in order to make the maroon legs into maroon pants. I then add a worm on top of the legs in order to make them actual full pants. After that, I bulk up the knees and blend them in. Once I have the knees blended in, I can bulk up the upper part of the pants in order to make it look more realistic, I guess. And those two get blended in as well. Then I add in some creases on the groin area and just flatten out all of that. Then I add in some gray spheres as the shoes, and a worm around the top of the shoe to act as the pants going on top of the shoe, covering it up, because that's what a lot of the Terraria characters actually look like. Then, once both of the legs get the worm around the shoe, I blend them in. And once they get blended in, I can add all the creases, folds, and bends on the bottom part of the legs. And once I have all of those little worms around there, I can blend them all in and have legs. Once every single little crease is on there, I can finally start to blend all of the worms into the legs in order to make actual creases. And once I continue to blend in every single little detail, I will finally have the legs, and I can make the seams on the edge of the pants, which is the last step in making the pants, so that I can bake the pants and start working on the upper body. Now that the legs are done, I first start by making some basic shapes for the arms and attaching them to the body so that I have a thing to make the shirt around. I then have a flattened sheet and cut out some holes for the arms so that the arms don't get covered by the sheet of clay and I can better fit it. Then I cover everything, and I cover the body in another layer of the blue clay and just flatten everything so that there's no obvious seams. After that, I cut in a V shape for a little ascot, of course. Well, because there's a little white texture, but I don't really know what to make it, so I just decided to make it an ascot with the gray clay. However, I did make a texture for it this time. Didn't really stick because I kept handling the clay, so the texture just ended up getting lost over time. I then add the bottom part of the overcoat and blend that into the top part. After, of course, I make it all flowy and whatever. After that, I add some worms to the area around the ascot in order to make it more look like it is supposed to. And this happens to both sides the same way, making sure that it is how I would like it. And also a piece over the arm to cover up the top part of the arm. These get blended into the rest of the thing, except no, they don't really get blended in fully because there is still an obvious outline on some of the sides of it. That goes from the front part all the way to the back part. Except not the back part quite yet. That doesn't happen until a little bit later, but it still does happen. I then make sure that the seam is incredibly noticeable so that you can notice the seam. And after that, I give the traveling merchant a little belt thing, and I re-puff up the bottom part. Here's where I add the gap and the little edge thing on the back part, and I continue to just mess with the bottom part of the overcoat, and then I give him a little neck. Now that I have the neck, I bake everything and add in a head, too. The head is just a large ball on top of that little neck stub I made earlier. Once I have the head shape right, I make some eyes, and because I'm going to bake them later, I also make a feather that I would have just baked later anyway. The feather gets some texture from just scratching it up with a little tool. And once the texture of the feather is done and copied onto both of the sides, I can bake both of them and shove the eyes into the head in order to start making the actual face. Once the eyes are in the head, I add some worms around the eyes in order to make it look like the eyes are actually inside of the head, which usually I don't have to do, but on more like realistic Terraria type builds, I usually do. But right here, I just indent the eye so that it is a flat circle all the way around the eyelids, and then I add a ball of tan clay for the nose. Once the nose gets blended in, I can then poke in a little mouth and make it a slight smirk, I guess, because I felt like it. And then once I have that, I can add in the pupils, which is just light blue, same color that I made the belt as, and those just get flattened onto the face. And then I add in some eyebrows, which are a medium gray, and then I add the hair in that same color, starting with just the tops because the sides are going to be added later, with a little part in the middle of the hair. After that, I make a little shape that the hair is, and then I just blend it into the rest of the head. This gets added onto both sides to cover up the tan that was there originally, and made into a little thingy. I then re-add the part and flatten the little curves to make them more of a McDonald's M instead of a sharp one. And then I add the hat, starting by making the little brim of the hat, which is a full top hat. And then once I have the full brim, I add in the top part of the hat. Top of the top hat. Top of the top hat is not a flat cylinder, but it is thinner at the bottom. This gets blended into the brim of the hat and then cut so that it is the correct size. Once the top hat is fully cut, I continue to shape it and then add the red worm across the base of the hat. This is the same color as the pants and gets smushed into the top hat. Once the red worm is on there, I can finally add that feather that I made earlier and just poke it into the rest of the hat. Now is where I remake the ascot, and I add in a little bit of texture by poking at it with a little tool that I have, and then once that's done, I can continue to make the body. I add little worms around where the ascot is, similar to the first time, except this time it goes around the back of the neck to cover little white areas that were there originally. This then gets blended in to the other stuff, to the earlier worm that was there. And once it is fully blended in, I can start working on these shoulders by adding 2 larger worms to the sides of the shoulders and blending them in. I give him cool looking shoulders, I guess. I don't really know. I just add 2 little things on the shoulders to give him like shoulder pads and stuff. and then blended them into the old worms. This is the same for both sides and gets blended in so that there is no obvious gap or seam. Once it is fully blended in, I can re-add the arms and just stick them into the arm stubs that I had earlier. I then position the arms so that one is grabbing his chin in like a thinking position, I guess, and one is just kind of crossed behind his back. I cut both of the arms so that's the proper size, and then make two little hands without fingers because I don't want to, just by poking out a flat sheet and then adding a thumb. I curled in one of the hands and added it on top of the chin. And then I had one hand that got blended into the wrist, but shaped into a fist behind his back. Of course, I did have to open up back up the hand in order to actually blend it into the wrist. So, after that, I add worms to the actual bicep area and blended into the, again, older worm that was also there. This, again, like most parts, happens to both sides of the arms. And once it's finished, it's time for a base. My brother decided to go for an ice thingy in the snow biome, so I just went with it because I haven't really made anything similar to that. So with some translucent blue and translucent white, I made a flat sheet, and then I added a little glints of white on the top or whatever, and pushed it in, and it's done.